Hello, everybody. I'm here with Connor Garritty. He's agreed to do an artist spotlight. So thank you so much for joining us here today. I appreciate your time.
All right. I appreciate it too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging in and hearing all about your personal history.
Yeah, so, I'm interested to remember how long it's been.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when did you first start to get interested into tattooing?
It would have been 1994, I think. I was in grade 11 or 10 maybe, and my brother and his buddies were a couple of years older than me, started getting tattoos, and I always kind of grew up watching Motley Crue and all the hair metal bands in the 80s and stuff, and they all had tattoos, so I just thought it was super cool, and so I wanted one, and I think I was 17, I think maybe, or 16, and I had a fake school ID that I had like gone in and said I was an older kid and pretended to be him, so they made it was actually like a real school ID, but it fake name and fake birth date. So I took that down to Raptor Tattoo.
Okay.
In Edmonton, when it used to be above the venue called the Bronx. I had like cut out an old piece of Leo Zuleta flash from a tattoo magazine.
Okay.
A little piece of black tribal, super famous one now. Like in retrospect, going back, I see it all the time. Like I was going to get that. And anyway, so I cut it out of the magazine and I went in and said, I want this, and handed it to her and showed her the ID. She wanted to see my ID, and I was like, yeah. And I just had that in my pocket, like just this random piece of school ID.
Yeah.
She looked at it and then looked at me a couple of times, and she's just like, you know what? Why don't you come back in a week? If you still want this tattoo, I'll do it for you. I was like, kind of bummed, but also like, okay, well, she didn't question my ID, so I was like, all right, fine, I'll come back.
Okay.
And within 2 days, I decided that I didn't want that tattoo. My brother kind of made fun of me and like basically was just like, don't get that. That's stupid. And so I didn't. And I changed my mind. And then I ended up getting a drawing that my brother had drawn of these like 3 magic mushrooms with these little colored kind of cartoon faces, because I was big into magic mushrooms in high school. And I went back to Raptor a couple, like maybe a month or 2 later, and it was Danny Gordy that was there that time.
Okay.
And Danny was like, yeah, this is cool, I'll do it. And I sat down and went through it, and he was just really cool and like super nice to me. And I was just blown away by the whole like experience and just being in the shop, being so scared, but so excited. And like at that moment, I was like, man, this is so cool. And so that was kind of the start for me, like as far as like being in a tattoo shop. Flash forward, I don't know, maybe 1995, summer of 95, maybe. I just graduated high school, and my brothers and my friends and his friends were in a band in Edmonton, and they were all getting tattooed from this guy who was doing tattoos in St. Albert, in my hometown. And like, I guess he was doing them homemade. Like, I didn't know the difference at the time. I just thought he's doing tattoos. Cool. And I wanted one, but he wouldn't tattoo me because I wasn't in the band. So we ended up being at my guitar player at the time's party at his house, or we were hanging out at his house, and his brother had built a homemade tattoo machine and was like tattooing himself and a couple of his buddies and stuff. And I was like, man, I really want to try that. Can I try? He's like, yeah, go ahead. And my bass player from my band at the time said, yeah, you can do one on me. So I used his machine. I made like a new tube for it and made a whole new needle and stuff, and tattooed the logo from my first band on my bass player at the time. It took me like, 9 hours or something. It was like this big, like not very big at all. Yeah. I saw him last May, and I got a picture of it. It still holds up. It's still there. Yeah.
Great. I'd love to see that photo.
Yeah.
I'll
send it into you. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we did that. And like, once I kind of like, I was trying to figure it out without knowing what I was doing. And I didn't know what I was doing was different than, I just know that it wasn't making any sound like the tattoo machine that I had gotten tattooed by. And I don't know, I finished that tattoo and I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. And I think that was the moment I was like, man, I want to do this. Right. So I ended up copying his and making my own. I like ripped apart my boombox
Yeah.
and ripped it all apart. The one I got for Christmas a few years prior, and ripped it apart, took the motor out, the spoon, and like all the electrical tape. And yeah, and I was pretty stoked. I did that for about a year. Just on friends and like, you know, friends of friends and the girlfriend and her friends, and just stupid little like, you know. And I remember using the ballpoint pen on tracing paper and the speed stick, and just all the things that you look back now going, man, that was tough, right? Like the stencil would just wipe off in 5 seconds. But yeah, that was it. That's how I kind of got into it. And then that was my like first kind of like, and even then I still didn't really know. I had no clue about anything about the tattoo industry, right? Like I'd been tattooed twice or 3 times, 3 or 4 times, I think. And still didn't know the difference, right? I didn't even correlate that what I was doing was wrong versus what those guys were doing was right. I was trying to figure out everything on my own, right? Like I know that I need ink caps, and how are they sticking the ink caps to the table, and like all these things that I just didn't know. And then finally my parents were just kind of like, not coming down on me, but pressuring me to like, we need you to like do something. You can't just, you know, live at home and party and whatever you're doing. You need to go back to school or figure out a career or a job. Like, we're willing to help. And I was just like, well, and I was pretty scared at the moment to kind of tell them what I was going to say. And I said, I want to learn how to tattoo properly. Like that's what I want to do. And both my parents were like, okay, figure it out. So I pulled out the yellow pages, the Edmonton yellow pages, and I flipped through to the tattoo section, and I called every shop in the city. At the time, I think there was only maybe 9 or 10. And only 2 of them even gave me like even the time to like talk to me for more than 30 seconds of like, no, click kind of thing. One was a place called Shambhala, which was on White Ave.
Okay.
And I went to, he said, yeah, come down, bring your portfolio. And I didn't have a portfolio, right? Like I drew in high school and I had some drawings. So I just like clipped together as much stuff as I could. And I think I put it in a binder, and I went down there, and the guy made me sit in the front room for like almost an hour and didn't even come out, kept sending someone out to tell me to wait longer. And finally I was like, you know, fuck this. I'm not sitting here waiting for this guy like this. This is bullshit. Like wasting my time or whatever, right? Like maybe back then it just didn't feel right at the time. I just felt like I was being kind of like treated like shit. And I had the backup of my father was going to help me. And like, I knew that there was a place for me. So I just was like, you know what, I'm leaving. And I told the girl at the front counter, and she's like, are you leaving? I was like, yeah, I'll just tell him thanks, but I don't want to wait anymore. So I left. And in retrospect, I like thought about it after, like, God, did I just screw up my opportunity? And then the next day I called Raptor Tattoo. And for some reason, it was lucky I got Glenn on the phone. Like, he answered the phone, which was rare, I guess. Finding out after that he always had somebody else. There was somebody there that I could answer phones and do all that stuff. And he had answered the phone because I called pretty early in the morning on a Monday or Tuesday or something. And he answered. He's just like, okay, come on down. Let's talk. So I went down, I drove down, and I think it was winter time, I think. And I drove down and 30 below or whatever, and went in and talked to him. And he was like super intimidating. He was a bit older of a guy at the time. I mean, I don't know. He must have been in his maybe mid 50s at the time, which to a 17, 18-year-old kid, that was old, right? And but then he just was like super nice. He was super nice to me, and he just told me the price. He's like, this is what it costs. I charge for an apprenticeship. This is how long it'll be. Do you want to do it? I was like, do you want to look at my drawings? He's like, no. You seem like a cool guy. And I was left-handed. I'm left-handed, and he was left-handed too. So I think that like he kind of took a liking to that. But he was also the person that apprenticed Danny Gordy. He was Danny Gordy's mentor before me. Okay. So Danny Gordy, and I found out at the time because Danny had tattooed me. He's like, yeah, I just finished, or maybe a year prior, Danny had finished his apprenticeship. And, you know, now Danny's work was just kind of all over the city. He was kind of getting really big at the time. And so I was pretty stoked about that because Danny did my first tattoo and he was left-handed. And so he basically told me the price and like the time. He said, it's going to be 6 months. It's a 6-month apprenticeship. Bring your dad in and let's talk. So I came back with my dad like 2 days later, and my dad and him had a chat. They worked out the money end of it. And fortunately, my dad was, in a position to help. And that was it. He like gave me a list of supplies. He's like, this is the stuff you're going to get. I'll help you pick the stuff. And he's like, when can you start? I'm like, now? Like, good answer.
Sure.
So my dad left and I stayed for the rest of the day and just kind of hung out. And that was kind of the start of it.
Back in 96, that was 96 that you got
that apprenticeship? Yeah, I started my apprenticeship in May of 96.
So back then, that's quite a lucky break to get into a shop. Back then, it was a lot harder, right?
Yeah, and I didn't know at the time, right? Like I didn't know. Back then, I didn't even understand, right? Like I had no clue. I've been in a tattoo shop 3 times for like an hour at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue what the gift I was that I was just given, right? Like, and now looking back, I've had an apprentice and you see other people getting into the industry and you're just like, it's like, you don't want to sound like that old guy, like back in my day, but it's true, right? Like,
yeah,
I was fortunate.
Next, Connor talks about when he got the opportunity to tattoo some bands, which ultimately leads him to go and start tattooing down in Los Angeles. At this point in his career, he was working for Ed Holmes at Liquid Sliver Tattoo in Vancouver.
Summer of 99, Ozfest was coming through Vancouver, and we went and we ended up meeting the guys from Slipknot, and we went down to Seattle and saw them play. Anyway, exchanged numbers, met those dudes, and then they came back through the following November with Cold Chamber and played the Croatian Cultural Center in Vancouver, and they wanted to get tattooed. So I lugged my tattoo stuff down to I'm like, this is it. This is my shot. I'm going to meet all these guys. And I lugged my stuff down to the Croatian Cultural Center. I ended up tattooing one of the guys from Slipknot and 2 guys from Cold Chamber. And they were like, come to Seattle tomorrow and do some more tattooing. And so I ended up like staying with them for about 2 weeks. I jumped on the bus in like Portland, I think, and just did the rest of the tour and like hung out and partied and tattooed and got introduced to that whole side of things and just was like, holy shit, this is what tattooing can bring me, right? Like, not thinking about all the other amazing things that tattooing has to offer, but and whether it was the right or wrong thing to do at the time, I was just young and wanted to be in the band, and so I was like, I'm going to use my tattooing to further everything I can do, right? And Ed was cool with it because he was into metal and liked all the bands, and I would bring him merch home from all these bands, and like, he was super cool with it. And then finally I ended up like deciding to move to LA. Like, I'm like, I'm going to LA. Like, fuck this. Right. Like I think I went to LA, spent a couple of days there after one of the tours and just like enamored by it all and the weather and middle of winter and just being like, holy shit, it's so nice here. So I ended up leaving Liquid Sliver in like the fall of 2000. Yeah. And that was the end of that chapter. No, okay. It was cool. Like Ed, like I said, Ed was, I got nothing but amazing things to say about Ed and Liquid Sliver and his wife Trina and all of them and all the people that he introduced me to and the things I learned from him. And Glenn Morwa was, he started it all for me because of the apprenticeship, and he was nice and like, but he was more of like that kind of like father figure, like dad kind of tattooer, like older uncle kind of thing. And Ed was like my friend. So there was the difference of those two, like, but Ed was definitely more like a big mentor for me. Yeah.
It's easy to see looking at your tattoos. You've certainly developed a style. Back in the late 90s, was that sort of coming into focus yet, or?
No, not even, right? Like in the 90s, like even at Ed's, it was still on that like old school street shop. It was like you tattoo whatever comes through the door and you just do it. And
yeah.
So, and even at Raptor, I was taught early on, it's like, learn everything, get good at everything. Don't turn like, and we were more out of fear of like getting fired, because if we let something leave the door, we'd be in trouble, right? It's like, you're taking money out of the boss's pocket or off the table of the boss or whatever. So it's like, plus I wanted to have money, right? So for me, it was easy. I would turn stuff away if I was like nervous to do it or stuff, but like, it was like, I was doing anything and everything at that time. And I think most tattooers were, right? Like that were in street shops. And I think like, and that was the cool thing about Sacred Heart for me, because like, you could see those guys were like they were like kind of past that point. Like they were a couple years ahead of where I was, and they were just kind of doing their own things. Like I'd watch Steve Moore tattoo and like see his drawings on his walls and just be like, wow. Right. But I didn't have the skills at that point to draw that way or whatever. And a lot of that comes with working with other tattooers that are that skilled. And, so I didn't really pick up a style. Like I started doing my own versions of things, you know, like, yeah, as far as like my style, like that stuff I'm doing now, that's kind of come in the last 7-8 years, like the kind of 80s, you know, that kind of throwback stuff. Like I started with like taking a lot of that old school, like tattoo brand JD Crow flash and I use a lot of their imagery and their stuff and like revamping it, putting the cool borders around it and like the shapes and stuff. That was kind of how that started. And then I just started to go with it, and people just started to kind of like grab onto it. And so, yeah, super fortunate, right? Like you always like, you spend your whole career trying to like do one thing or like focus on something. And then as soon as you stop, like kind of trying or whatever, like it wasn't something that I planned. I just was like stoked to draw this stuff and like add these things to it. And also like pay respects to like, for me, like that kind of flash of the Marty Holcomb, the Cherry Creek, the tattoo brand, the Henning stuff. I'm trying to think of what else was on the walls. Like that was traditional tattooing to me, right? Like I have a profound respect for American traditional and this like forefathers of tattooing. But like for me, that was what was pop like on the walls when I learned. So, that was kind of my thing. Like I wanted to bring that back, like the 80s and 90s kind of like biker flash. And
yeah, because when I look at your work, it reminds me of like a t-shirt out of the 80s, like a t-shirt for Miami Vice or something like that, right?
Awesome. That's what I'm going for.
And I'm like, this stuff is fucking rad. This is so cool. I love the style.
Yeah, it like for me it was just like wanting to like see some things like that I thought were cool, like whether it's like old characters from cartoons or like old toys. Like I'm a big fan of like 80s toys and collectibles and stuff. So I was like, how come nobody's done a Ninja Turtles piece or like, I mean, you see them, but like the actual toys, not so much like a comic book version of Ninja Turtles or like whatever, like, you know, doing stuff of like their old cartoon raccoons or the Muppets or whatever, like all these things that were out in the 80s and early 90s and stuff. And so it's just things that I like that make me happy. And I just like, they've got to make other people happy too. But I got to find myself.
Just it. You feel happy when you look at your work.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, early on, it was like, you know, everyone's like, you got to learn how to do Japanese. And I'm like, why? You know, like I respect it and I love it. And it's beautiful art and like the history and all of it. But like, I'm not Japanese, and there's Japanese people that do this stuff super good. And they're like, they're, you know, born into it literally, right? Like essentially. And it's like, I want to do my own, like, I don't, you know, that stuff is rad, but like, I'll leave that to those guys. Cause like, same with like the, like, you know, the LA kind of California Chicano style and like the super fine line black and gray. I was like, I can do it. I know how to do black and gray and I've learned it. And I can, you know, I can do portraits if the picture's right. But like at the end of the day, it's like my number one goal is to make my client or the customer feel like they're special and like that their tattoo is important, whether it's, you know, whether it's a tiny little outline heart or a full sleeve or like no tattoo is worse than the others. Like it's like, again, it's all relative to like what they want and what they feel is special. Like who am I to tell them that thing's stupid or whatever? Like as long as as long as you do like a proper job and a quality like craft of it, you know, like the craft part of it and like the technical side of it, who cares what it is, right?
Yeah, I feel happy looking at your work.
Well, good. That's my goal. Like, right? Like,
that's awesome.
And it, honestly, man, I never really like. I just started doing them, and because they made me, I had fun, and I was like, it was like exciting for me to like add these other elements in and like learn how to do it. Like, because I had to like learn. Okay, well, what are these things that like what makes it look like that? So I had to like do the research and look at old stuff from the 80s and the 90s and like the graphics, t-shirts, and like a lot of logos from like skateboarding and snowboarding companies, like all sorts of stuff, right? Like old Gotcha and like
Yeah.
Jimmy Z or whatever, Jimmy's, and like a lot of surf stuff, like TNC Surf Designs. Man, those companies were doing such cool art back in the day. And
Yeah.
and again, it was just stuff that was made, like, because I buy a bunch of vintage t-shirts and like I'm into that stuff, right? And then it just, you can tell when someone's happy doing what they like to do. You can tell in their work, right? Like you can tell that.
Yeah, it translates.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to this video. This was about 20 minutes of a 2-hour conversation I had with Connor. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want to hear the rest of it, you'll have to wait for the Canadian Electric Tattoo Scene book when it comes out.